You ever had someone so obsessed with your property that they just wouldn't stop until you gave them something they'd never forget? Well, that was my HOA Karen, and my mailbox was her favorite target. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where lawns are neatly trimmed, kids ride bikes in the evening, and the biggest excitement is usually a weekend garage sale. But every paradise has a serpent, and ours was a woman named Karen. She wasn't officially the president of the HOA, but she acted like she was the self-appointed queen of the block. Clipboard in hand, oversized sunglasses perched on her bleached blonde hair, and a constant smug look that screamed, "I'm in charge here." For months, she kept trespassing onto my property, and her favorite victim, my mailbox. Every other day I'd catch her snooping, opening it, rifling through, and sometimes even removing my mail. Packages, letters, even flyers. If it went into my mailbox, Karen acted like it was hers to inspect. It wasn't just creepy, it was illegal. At first, I thought maybe she was just nosy, the type who needed to know what everyone else was up to. But then I noticed fines showing up in my HOA inbox. Things like unapproved decorations on mailbox, or mailbox flag at improper angle. Can you believe that? She was writing me up for nonsense. I reported her. I complained to the HOA, but they shrugged it off because she was the vice president. Apparently, her word carried more weight than actual proof. That's when I knew this wasn't innocent snooping. This was control. She wanted to remind me that even on my own property, she had power. And that was the moment I decided to fight back. Not with lawyers, not with endless HOA meetings, but with something she'd never see coming. Oh no, this battle was going to be fought with bees. Because let me tell you, when Karen opened that mailbox after my little upgrade, she screamed so loud the whole block came running. If Karen had stopped after the first warning, this whole nightmare might have ended. But she couldn't help herself. She wanted to win, and that was her biggest mistake. The next week, she was back at it. I caught her in broad daylight, arm halfway inside my mailbox like she owned it. I stepped out onto my porch and called her out, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Hey, what are you doing with my mail?" Her response? Not an apology, not even embarrassment. She turned, smug grin plastered across her face, and said, "You wouldn't even have mail privileges if it weren't for the HOA. I'm just making sure things stay in order." That's when it hit me. She thought she had legal authority, like she was some kind of suburban policewoman guarding the sanctity of the neighborhood. The arrogance in her voice made my blood boil. The final straw came a few days later when I received a $250 fine for illegal mailbox modifications. Except I hadn't modified a thing. She was literally making up rules just to punish me, and the board let her get away with it. So I decided, if she wanted to see modifications, I'd give her some, safe, legal, but unforgettable. That's when I got in touch with a local beekeeper. I explained my little pest problem, though Karen was the real pest, and he was more than happy to help. Together, we safely placed a small, harmless beehive box inside the hollow back of my metal mailbox. Don't worry, the bees weren't trapped or endangered. They had airflow, space, and could come and go. But anyone sticking their hand inside that box would get a very buzz-worthy surprise. It wasn't dangerous, but it was effective. And let me tell you, the moment Karen's fingers brushed against those buzzing wings, her face went from smug superiority to pure, unfiltered terror. You ever seen karma strike instantly? Because when Karen opened my mailbox that morning, it wasn't just mail waiting for her, it was justice with wings. It was a sunny Saturday morning. I was sipping coffee on the porch, pretending not to watch. Karen strutted down the sidewalk, clipboard under her arm like always, her expression a mix of self-importance and determination. She slowed down as she approached my house, glanced around, and then made her move. Like clockwork, she reached for the mailbox. She flipped the lid open, shoved her hand inside. And then came the shriek. The sound of buzzing filled the air as Karen yanked her hand back, stumbling into the street, waving her arms like she was on fire. The bees, startled but harmless, buzzed around her like a cloud of natural justice. To Karen, though, it was the apocalypse. Neighbors peeked out from their windows. Some gasped, others laughed. My buddy across the street even pulled out his phone and started filming. It was the moment we'd all been waiting for. The HOA tyrant finally getting what she deserved. Karen ran back up the sidewalk, flailing her arms, screaming, "He's weaponized the mailbox. This is illegal. I'm calling the HOA and the police." And she did. Within an hour, both showed up. Karen was red-faced, dramatic as ever, waving her bandaged hand like she'd survived a war zone. She ranted about mailbox terrorism, about weaponized insects, about how I had turned my property into a biohazard. The officers looked at me, then at her, then back at me. I calmly explained, "Officer, the bees are safely housed. They're not dangerous, and this woman, she's been trespassing on my property and tampering with my mail repeatedly." The officers exchanged a look. Then one of them turned to Karen and said the words that silenced the entire street. "Ma'am, you have no legal authority over his mailbox. In fact, tampering with mail is a federal offense." Karen's face drained of color. For the first time ever, she was speechless. And when Karen realized that she was the criminal in this story, not me, you could see the panic sink in. Karen thought she could outsmart the law, but in the end, it wasn't me she had to answer to. It was the very people she pretended to control. The HOA board gathered the next week. For once, the entire neighborhood was paying attention. Karen stormed into the meeting like a one-woman hurricane, arm wrapped in gauze for dramatic effect, pointing at me like I was a villain in a crime drama. She ranted for nearly 15 minutes straight about biological warfare, about rogue bees threatening HOA order, about how I had endangered the entire block. But then came the kicker. The board president cleared his throat, shuffled his papers, and said, "Karen, the police already informed us that you trespassed, tampered with federal mail, and harassed a homeowner. You're suspended from your duties, effective immediately." The room went silent. Karen's jaw dropped. Not only was she stripped of her HOA title, but the bogus fines she'd issued me were voided. In fact, I even received an apology letter from the board for mismanagement of authority. Neighbors, who had been too scared to speak against her before, now felt emboldened. Some even laughed openly as Karen stormed out of the meeting, red-faced and humiliated. As for the bees, the beekeeper relocated them to a nearby garden where they thrived happily without bothering anyone. But the legend of the mailbox bees lived on. Neighbors still chuckle when they pass by, whispering, "That's the mailbox that stung Karen's ego." And me? I got the peace and privacy I'd been fighting for all along. My mail stayed safe, my property stayed mine, and Karen, well, she never trespassed again. So if you ever deal with a Karen who just won't stop, sometimes the sweetest revenge comes with a little buzz.